Oh, okay, good. So we're recording.
Okay. Hi. So I'm Clare Sautter and am faculty with the Coaching Leader Program. And we're having a conversation today about coaching, diversity, specifically about race. And with me, I have Felice Tilin and Delores Mason. Do you want to each just say a word?
Sure. Hi, I'm Felice. I'm the executive director of the Coaching Leader Program, and happy to be here.
Yes, hi, I'm Delores Mason, and I am a mentor coach with the Coaching Leader Program. Also happy to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm glad to have both of you. Um, Dolores, if it's okay, I'll start with you.
Sure.
And what is it like when you coach a white person?
I've been thinking about this. It's very interesting. I mean, I've had this obviously. I've been coaching for a number of years, and I was thinking because one of my recent coachees was a white male executive, and I just remember initially before even meeting him in my head thinking like, okay, I have to prepare myself for this, because I felt the inequity, and it was all my perception obviously, but it's a reality. It's a reality that we have to face. I'm not an executive in a big corporation or even a large university, and yet here I'm about to coach a person who is. And so it just was magnified by the fact that he was white and male. So that was just something I naturally think of, and I don't always think that when I coached a black executive in a corporation. I always feel like I at least have something in common, even if it's external. And but that's something that I need to process as a coach, because going in, I still need to be able to reach that level where I do feel we are equals. Like we're going to partner on this, and that's essential when you're a coach.
Yes, it is that the partnership perspective.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, Felice, if it's all right, let's switch to you and I'll just ask you the same question. Although, what is it like when you coach a black person?
Yeah. So, I was thinking about this, and there's no formula. I really related to what you said, Dolores, though, because I remember in the beginning of my career,
Yes.
coaching white executive males and feeling like it was very unequal as well. It's like the external, I was younger. I certainly was not an executive. I mean, they made more money than, my house costs in a year. And so I remember that uncomfortability and trying to bridge it. And I think over time I've gotten better at that. And maybe it's kind of flipped in a certain way. So when I'm coaching somebody who's black and is an executive, to be honest, there's still the executive piece is still there too. It's like, not only are they, so a black woman is like, okay, I could relate because we're both women. I could kind of relate because we're both from slightly disenfranchised groups. But I've never been a CEO of an organization like that big. So there's still that. So it's kind of like you got to figure out, like, where is it that your uncomfort is? So that's one of the uncomforts. And the other thing so that's a preparation of like kind of getting myself to be okay with that. But then the other side of it is, how do I help somebody, or how do I partner with somebody who may have, so my thing is like, who may have really kind of feeling like this white person is never going to understand what I'm going through. And feeling like that could be the case. I really, and it's kind of like I have to work that all out myself so that I can be present with that person.
Yes.
Regardless of my stuff, I have to be present with that person. So how I get present with that person and how I have that conversation is probably the next topic. But it's pretty essential.
Right.
Yeah, it is about presence and the coaching presence. Dolores, as you listened, did anything come up for you around that presence?
Right. That's I agree 100%. And Felice, because that's what I mean by getting to the equality. It's an equality of presence. I mean, there's never going to be equality because there's difference is great, and as a coach, we embrace it. I embrace it, the difference, because I expect to learn as much as I'm helping the individual learn as well. But that's true. It's me getting to that equal level of presence, meaning I am here for you 100%. You're here for you 100%. Like, let's do this together. And so absolutely. And I think that's the work of a coach prior to any coaching session. It's like, get all that, I'll borrow from the Jewish word mishigash, right? Out of your head, right? Get all that stuff out of your head so you can be present. And you can do, because that is the crux of coaching. That's the crux of the partnership for the coach themselves. It's all about, I am guaranteeing you that I will be fully present with you every time that we meet, every time that we talk.
Mhm, mhm.
That's a big guarantee, isn't it?
It is. It is. And it's something that we have to strive for because we're not always present.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times I've been in a coaching session and then I sort of come back to myself and realize the person's been talking and I went somewhere. And so it's like, I don't want to like come right out and go like, I didn't listen to you for the last 30 seconds, So, but that's the great thing about coaching. It's like, we know we're human. We're going to have moments where we're not present. There's moments when the client's not present.
Definitely.
And our goal is to get them present and keep ourselves present.
Yeah.
I think if I could just come in with something else. So
Yeah.
also, I feel like that's so I do feel like that's the basics. That's the basis, not basic, because it's tough. But I think there's also something for me. One of the things that I've worked on is and had to be paying attention to when I'm coaching anyone, but particularly somebody who's Black or African American, right, is my language. So am I going to ignore it? I mean, they know I'm white. I know they're Black, right? Is this part of their world? And like, how do I bring that up and in? And how does that impact them in their role? So kind of like, so if I'm working with an executive and they're the only Black executive who's ever been an executive of that organization that's Black, it's like, what is that like for them? And I'm curious about it. So sometimes it's the presence that brings on the curiosity and the language in me and the comfort level to ask those questions or to hear it in their statements to me and then be able to go to it. Sometimes it comes up very subtly with the client. I'm listening to them and they're saying something like, yeah, people have, I remember somebody I was coaching, a Black woman, and she said, well, everybody here looks at me funny. And I was kind of like, I said, what do you mean? And she said, what do you mean? What do I mean? I mean, I'm Black and nobody else here is Black. And I said, yes. What is that really like for you? How do we deal with this? How can you work with that? And how can you manage that in your life? It's like, I can't say like how she should. All I could do is talk to her. And then it was like the conversation just opened wide up and the coaching opened wide up. And we had a very productive conversation because it wasn't left out. It didn't have to be the focus, but it's part of who we are, right? It's our social identity.
That's true. That brings to mind for me, it's like the word courage, right? It's like, as a coach, you need the courage to be able to do that.
Yes.
To be able to lean in your curiosity. And it should be based on your curiosity. I mean, you're not going to ask a question that you're not really curious about because if you don't really care, or I mean, it comes across as insincere. And I think you came across as sincere by leaning into your curiosity and saying like, well, so what's it like for you? Like, talk to me. I'm not a Black woman in an organization, like the only one, so it's like, so talk to me. What's that like for you? And I think being able to share that, being able to, especially when the coach is the one who initiated the question, I think that gives people the confidence. So as a coach, it's essential that we have the courage to sometimes just lean in, lean into wherever your curiosity is, or if you hear something and if you're wondering about it, other people are wondering about it, and the client's probably wondering about it.
Yep.
Bring it up.
Mhm.
That's like one of the, because for instance, as I was telling you, the white executive that I was talking about earlier, and he had this issue around coming across as insincere to everybody that he worked with, not just people of color, but to everybody. And so in my head, I was thinking like, I don't know, it just sort of surprised me because I'm like, he has issues like this, And so I asked him about it, and I said, talk to me. I said, I've had my own issues where I feel, like I'm not connecting with people. So talk to me. How does that feel like? What's that like for you? And we got into a really good conversation, a deep conversation, where he expressed that he had vulnerabilities around his ability to really connect, and feeling like, what is that the imposter syndrome,
Mhm.
which threw me. He knew that phrase, and I was like,
Right.
wow. Wow. Like, everything I've ever read talks about how Black people usually have an issue with imposter syndrome, or women.
Women, Asian people. I've had a few
Exactly.
Asian clients that
And here's a white male executive who knew what it was and understood that he was having issues. So we had a great conversation on that.
Mm-hmm. I hear being courageous, being open, being curious, and really curious about that other person. That question, what's it like for you? Is, I versus trying to fix it or label it or judge it in some way. But what is it like for you?
Oh, yeah. I think that's so right on. I would just add one thing to that.
Yeah.
On the list is language.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
knowing the language of, and whatever you want to call it, you want to know the language of anti-racism, or the language of, how do you call people? And this is Black, African-American, Latina X, asking them what they are comfortable with, LGBTQ,
Yes.
gender, are you buying, you don't ask that as a coach, but like being comfortable when somebody's talking about that, to use their language.
Right.
Yes.
And to be able to not be afraid to say the words.
Right.
Anyway.
And if you don't know the language, asking.
Yes.
And
Yes.
what do you prefer? How do you identify yourself?
Yes.
I remember when I was actually coaching some people in and doing some interviews with some folks in the Native American tribes, and the Hopi tribe, and in the I can't remember, but the Hopi tribe in particular, but Navajo. And I kept saying, well, Native American, and they were like, Felice, we just say Indian. Indian, and we say Indian country.
Yes.
So it's not the, it's not the we call it the res, Indian country, and Indian. And I was like, res, Indian country, Indian. Because I was so trained to say Native American.
Right.
And yet that's not how they identified.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I had, well, this was in my teaching, I have a student who's Vietnamese. And she introduced herself as Sarah. And then when we got to the portion of the course where we were talking about diversity, and she mentioned that, it was a bit of a shock for her when she was coming to the U.S. that she was asked to choose an anglicized name.
Wow.
And so I asked her, I said, well, what is your Vietnamese name? And she told me. And I said, if you prefer to be called that, I'll be happy to call you that.
Yeah.
And it just it blew her mind, because she was like, she was told she had to drop her name. And I was like, that's not okay.
Right.
No.
It's not okay, and it shouldn't be okay.
Yeah.
It's our job to learn.
Right. Exactly.
Remember when we were in South Africa, Dolores, and sometimes people were from the Kosi,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And they would have names that were like that.
Right. They would click.
And that's what we did, lessons of the 3 different clicks. Not that we were any good at it.
No, right.
We were all terrible at it. But
Exactly.
we made the effort to say their name, say the person's name in the language that they have.
Right. I mean, most people are given a name that has meaning.
Yes.
And at least to the parents, and so to tell them discard your name, adopt our ways, it's a rude thing to do. So why not ask? It's like, tell me how you prefer to be called. and I will call you that.
It's like it would be the same thing as like ignoring someone's social identity when it's right in front of you,
Exactly.
right?
Mhm.
It's like if you ignore the fact that I'm a white woman, and then you know more about me, you find I'm a white lesbian Jewish woman. It's like that is part of who I am. It's not all of who I am, but it is definitely kind of part of the basics, you know. And you have, you know, also your background, and you know, you are who you are, you know. So
Exactly.
yeah.
That's what, and I think you're spot on. Language is key, and that to me is all part of it.
Mhm.
Names, how people identify themselves. So, which is why I think that's one of the competencies, right? It's like using the language the client uses,
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
repeating their language back to them, because most times I think people don't even think about how they speak,
Mhm.
you know? So just honoring that, pointing it back to them, saying like, you know, oh, you used this phrase, or this is, you know, this is what you said. It means something to them,
Mhm.
you know? And if you're curious enough, find out what is the meaning behind it.
Mhm. Yeah. I think there's, you know, there's one more piece to this is the around being courageous.
Mhm.
And it's knowing that we might make a mistake.
Mhm.
Mm.
And
Yes.
then being courageous enough to work with that too.
Yes.
So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that too, because I mean, when it's likely to happen that I could say something that I didn't necessarily intend and make a mistake around it,
Right.
with language or something along those lines.
Yeah. Like I was saying earlier, like, you know, I zoned out on a client, right?
Yes.
You know, because my own stuff was going on in my head. And yeah, like, I mean, it was embarrassing for me to do it, but I didn't want to get to that point where, you know, say the person made a comment and it was essential,
Yeah.
you know, and I didn't want to just say, could you repeat that again? Because that really felt disrespectful. But I did acknowledge. And I said, I'm sorry, I was in my head, you know? And so I at least acknowledged that to let them know it's like, I'm human. I am human too. You know, I don't always have the answers.
Mhm.
I mean, it was, I remember one client and she kept asking me questions. And so I would just follow the coaching thing and just ask the question back or repeat the question or say, what do you think? And on the third one, she just looked at me. She goes, really? Is this how this is going to go? And I just stopped and I said, you know what? I said, you're right. No, it's not going to go that way. And so I just explained to her, I said, I'm here for you. So I understand you're asking me for my opinion, but my opinion is not really what matters here.
Yeah.
You know, it's I'm here to help you explore your own.
That's a great example of being like
Yeah,
techniquey.
right. So I just want to be honest with her and just say, look, this is going to be the process.
Yeah.
You know, so you know, let's work with that. And since she still asks questions every once in a while, but I didn't have to cover it. I would just say, that's a question. And I'd be happy to answer it, but we're not in the middle of a coaching session. But for now, and I'll get us right back on track by directing her to whatever the last thing is we were talking about.
Nice. Nice. Well, I think as we wrap up, is there anything else that you'd like to add or finish with?
Yeah, I think especially in terms of race, right? You know, because that's really what we're talking about here. It's I still have those moments, you know, where I feel that uncomfortability, right? That the level of and again, it's my perception of an inequity. It's something I have to manage. And some of the best conversations I've had is when a client leans in and relaxes and is okay with talking about a racial issue.
Mhm. Mhm.
You know, so and I realize that I'm cheating them out of that if I don't manage myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an opportunity. I'm gonna add to what you just said that this is such a wonderful time in a way, because right now, here we are in 2021. I don't know when somebody's watching this, but this is a very good time because almost every organization is dealing in some way with diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. And I've started to, in my like kind of first inquiry with somebody when I do the first session, I always, or most of the time, ask a question about what do you feel about what's going on here with DEI?
Mhm.
And then they often will tell me what's going on, and then they'll tell me how they feel about it, or what should be done, or what needs to be done more. And I remember, and sometimes it's like, sometimes I'm coaching somebody who's Black, and they'll say, I am so tired of being called in to all of these times, all of these sessions. And then that becomes a conversation. How do we manage that in the organization? And how does this person manage it? Or I get sometimes I get some very interesting things like, but I think all lives matter, or, I'll get some but we could work on some of those things. And I have my own opinion, and I have to watch that out for that too. But it brings a very, very, it's integral to our work in this country at this time. This is not something to be ignored.
Right.
And it brings it into the conversation because it's important in some way to everybody.
Mhm.
It
And if
is.
it's not important, somebody's telling them it's important.
Mhm.
And then they have a reaction to that. And that's something to work on too,
Yeah.
So I think we have important work to do in that area. I'm
I agree.
privileged to do it when I get to.
Awesome. Thank you both.
Thank
Thank you.
you.